Hi guys, the IEA is back. Remember them, the right-wing think tank that doesn't want you to know who funds them, but investigative journalists have discovered is backed by the fossil fuel and tobacco industries. Well, as Thames Water goes through a crisis and there are growing calls for the utility to be nationalised for the public good, one of the IEA representatives appeared on the Jeremy Vine show to push for more privatisation. Thankfully, Green Deputy Leader and rising star Zack Polanski was on hand to push back. Have a listen to this.
The point is, privatisation works when people, consumers, are able to choose. People don't have a choice. The government have still made that choice for
Zack,
them.
there's still, it needs more privatisation, not less.
Water is a human right, and anything that's a human right should be nationalised. Ultimately, anything that should be a public service should be in public hands.
What is a human right? Do you think food's a human right? Would you nationalise Sainsbury's?
Nationalise food.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for making sure that everyone in the country can eat, particularly young people, which is why
would you nationalise
It's
food?
policies like this, that, by the way, that cause mass starvation in countries like the Soviet Union.
I mean, that's not...
Oh my goodness. Okay, a few things to say here. First of all, no mention of Scotland. Yes, I hear you say. Scotland? Yes, because in Scotland, the water companies have been nationalised. There's a national provider of water in Scotland. And Scotland doesn't have the issue of raw sewage being pumped into rivers and lakes. As far as I know, you don't need a tetanus shot before going for a dip in Loch Ness. Also, the taxpayers in Scotland, the ratepayers in Scotland, aren't constantly being asked for cash, as what we're seeing with, for example, Thames Water, constantly going to the government saying, hey, give us some more money, or we need to increase the rate of our services because we need to invest in infrastructure. Infrastructure that we didn't invest in over the last number of decades because we gave the money, our profits, to our shareholders. It's a pity that Scotland wasn't raised here because Scotland is a success. Wales, slightly different situation, but much better than what's happening in England under privatisation.
Fundamentally,
thing to say.
This is exactly what it is. When the government take control of food, when the government take control of things that are important, they end up absolutely causing ruin throughout those industries.
But the government already control food. They control the quality of the food. The government... Nobody's advocating for the government to take over farmland and grow crops. But the government already subsidise food. They give farmers subsidies to keep the price of food down. If these subsidies didn't exist, you would be paying a lot more for meat, for cheese, for vegetables, for dairy products, milk, for example. You would be paying a lot more if these subsidies didn't exist. So in a sense, the government is intervening to keep prices down, but it's also intervening to keep standards up. Because if the IEA, imagine if the IEA were in charge, this is the organisation that were backing Liz Truss. If they were in charge, there would be no regulations. You'd have to, you'd have to hope for the best every time you went into a supermarket to buy food, hoping that it wouldn't kill you.
Fundamentally, I think food, water, electricity, all of these things are incredibly important, and that's exactly why I don't want the government to take their hands on it.
But if they were in public ownership, then the government would be able to control the price of them. And what's the problem at the moment when it comes to UK industry? The price of energy is too high. So if it was in public ownership, but also it's not just because it's linked to the price of gas, but because the infrastructure hasn't been upgraded. The private sector is not interested in upgrading the infrastructure unless it benefits them. So you need, in some cases, the state to come in. It's been demonstrated look at Scotland, once again, I'm just using one example here, but Scottish water is safer to drink than English water. The Scottish water quality is higher than English water because one is private and the other is public.
Human right is no matter how poor you are, you should have access to water and clean water. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah. The human rights thing, I don't understand. I mean, we've all got a human right not to be...
The human rights thing, I don't understand. You're a rich guy. Obviously, you don't understand why it's necessary for people to be able to access food. Okay.
A victim of crime, we've got a human right... in the end, life's not like that. It doesn't work like that.
Life is terrible. We shouldn't try and change anything. What a wonderful position to hold. Yeah, everything is pretty crap, but that's the way things are. No, you should. If you're looking around and saying things are pretty crap, you should be campaigning to change them. You should be supporting policies that would improve people's lives. Not just sit back and go, well, there's nothing we can do.
People are poor.
Well, I think it could be like that. That's why we have a police force, for instance, that is funded by the government. I think services that require people to get about being in society.
I think that the fact of the matter is the government taking control over so many of these industries results in people not being able to make those choices. Food, I think, is actually a really good example of that. We don't want the government meddling in food, where actually we have...
But the government do meddle in food. They set standards. Look, I don't know what position she's trying to take here. I don't understand what reality she lives in, where the government don't interfere with food. Yes, they do. They already do it. They've been doing it for the last 100-odd years.
Pretty good food industry. We've got groceries. People are able to make choices. What I want to see is more free trade. Let's remove tariffs and quotas from Moroccan tomatoes.
But you supported Brexit. Or you say you support Brexit. But Brexit is the opposite of free trade. Brexit is imposing barriers to trade. But then she goes on to say something else.
That are being imported to the UK. Why do we have them? It's because basically when we're a member of the EU, we've still kept them on. Let's take actual opportunities from Brexit and repeal all of that stuff.
Brexit has come up, my goodness. I thought it was coming.
Opportunities from Brexit.
Brexit gives
quite
us
triggering.
these opportunities. Let's actually go and...
Brexit is the opposite of free trade. Like, how can you as a libertarian support Brexit? How is trade going on at the moment when it comes to the European Union, the UK's biggest market? And she's talking about importing tomatoes from Morocco. What about tomatoes from Spain? Do you support reducing barriers to import tomatoes from Spain or from Italy? If you say yes, then you're against Brexit. Anyway, back to the main point here. When it comes to water, it should be under public ownership because it's guaranteed, or at least we hope that it's going to be guaranteed a minimum standard. When you have the private sector involved, what they do is they cut corners. Their goal is not to provide a service to the public, like a public service. It's in the name. It's to the private. It's a private sector. It's a private company, I should say. And their goal is profit, to maximize profit, either for themselves or for their shareholders. So while certain industries, it's perfectly acceptable for them to be run by the private sector, when it comes to fundamentals like infrastructure, like energy, like water, and to a certain extent food, when we want the government to intervene, we want the government to have a strong hand in that production, either through regulations or to actual ownership of those utilities. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.